Hi, my John Telemicard members and my heroes, my everything. Today we're delving into one of the bloodiest events in Swedish history, and it really puts the Red Wedding to shame. If you've seen Game of Thrones, which I guess everyone has, then you know what I'm talking about. This isn't like a Christmas video, but I'm taking a wide interpretation of the theme. This happened in winter. It was November, okay? So, more specifically, 1520 November in Stockholm. The year of the Stockholm Bloodbath. It's a tale of political intrigue, revenge, and it's just very, very, very horrible. There's a flood of blood down Stockholm Street by the end of it. Buckle up and let's get straight on into it. This whole debacle started with one king. That was Christian II of Denmark, but he was also king of Norway. But he was not content with that. Of course, he wanted to rule Sweden too and become a king over the Scandinavian countries there, excluding Iceland. Well, he did have Iceland if he was Danish, so forget that I said that. But Sweden was not having it. Led by a rebellious noble faction who were thinking, we'd rather not have a Danish king. They opposed Christian's efforts. Bad part here was that Christian II had a very large army, and he took them and very simply just took over the capital of Sweden, Stockholm, and he did that easily. And thus Sweden did surrender in 1520. A joyous occasion for the Danes.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
And of course, what would they do? Well, they needed to have a big party, a celebration that they won. Celebrate his newfound control of Sweden and Stockholm. There was a banquet to be had and a coronation, of course. As we already said, there was a huge faction of Swedish nobles who had opposed him coming in and taking over their land. So what was Christian to do with all these people? Well, he promised them amnesty if they just submitted to their new ruler. And to give them a bit of an olive branch, he invited them to his new fancy big party. He wanted the influential Swedes to come and celebrate his glory with him.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
But that olive branch might have been hiding a dagger. Foreshadowing. While all this was happening, in other parts of Sweden, we had a man who was called Gustav Vasa, who would become a very huge and important person in Swedish history. But right now, he was just a noble kid who was hateful of Christian because he had been suffering under Christian's rule and taking over of Sweden. At some point he was held captive even in Denmark, and he escaped that. So when he and his family became invited to this whole little party Christian was throwing, dear old Gustav Vasa was feeling a bit iffy about this invitation. A lot of his family and friends were going, but he wisely enough decided to not RSVP to this little shindig party coronation. And his instincts would prove to be very correct, because now I'm gonna tell you what happened at this little party. The coronation festivity, the banquet, was extremely extravagant, and it was to be held for 3 whole days. They wined and they dined, and they probably thought, maybe this Christian guy isn't that bad after all. He's up there at the end of the table just cheering and being a nice host. But on the 3rd day of the celebration, when people were either drunk or extremely hungover or maybe both, the warm glow of hospitality quickly turned ice cold. On that 3rd day, suddenly Christian stood up and accused everyone of heresy. Those Swedish nobles who had been opposing him like just a few weeks ago. A very convenient way to remove any opposition, of course. His soldiers just swarmed the hall, arrested everyone, and all the doors were locked. Those had actually been locked when the 3-day celebration even started. People might at this point realize that they should have stayed home. Which brings us to one of the comically tragic parts. Some of the nobles had actually been, late, as fancy people are, and were locked out from the festivities. And they caused a ruckus demanding to get entrance to this fancy banquet. And Christian, being a nice host, of course, let these people in. And in that way, they sealed their faith. I bet on that 3rd day, they wish they had gone home instead. And within moments of Christian standing up and just accusing everyone, the nobles were tied in chains, proving once and for all you did not want to be on that guest list. As we've stated a few times, this will not be good. The very next day, he took his imprisoned Swedish nobles and aristocrats and dragged them down into the big town square, which is still there today actually, and executed them, chopped their heads off in a display of power. Over 80 nobles, clergymen, and even some servants. There's a story of a man called Hasse who was also executed because he dared to stand in a corner and cry. The audacity of, I guess. These beheadings lasted for 2 full days, and the blood caused a river down the street, pooling, and they're awesome. And that's where we get the name, the Stockholm Bloodbath, or as we say in Sweden, Stockholm's Blodbad. And to top it all off, he decided to burn all the bodies in the big piles, and if he didn't burn them, he took their bodies as display, as a warning for anyone who would oppose his future rule. So at this point, Christian thought that he had secured his rule. But remember our boy Gustav Vasa? Well, he was out there rallying the Swedish people, telling them tales of the grim bloodbath. And by 1523, only 3 years later, Gustav led a rebellion and deposed Christian to the curb and became Sweden's first king, a ruler over the entirety of Sweden. So today Gustav Vasa is known as the very man who restored Sweden's independence as a country, but he also founded the Vasa dynasty, which ruled Sweden for hundreds of years. A bit of a national hero. We love to see it. In Sweden, Christian is called Christian Tyrannen or Christian the Tyrant. But in Denmark he has more of a nice memory to him. So that shows how Sweden and Denmark have this rivalry that's been going on forever and still to this day, even though it's more of a fun, jokey thing, because we don't war each other anymore. That's good. So, what did we learn today? Never trust a tyrant offering free food, and if you show up late to a party, just take the L and go home. Stay amazing, stay hydrated, and most of all, stay morbid, my lovely pals. And I'll see you soon.